if we have the diagnosis, how are we going to get better, Frederick? What are the ingredients for our audience to overcome the issues they're having with their Hoshin planning and their strategy execution?
So this is the famous silver bullet. Now, but all jokes aside, of course there are things and that we can see in more successful organization, kind of what are the common denominators. So these ingredients are based on research from that research project, among other things. It's also based on kind of observations we have made over the years, right? And there are 7 things that we have identified, and it's to be long-term thinking, right? Which I think most companies say they are because we have the vision and so on. So the long-term thinking, I think is something that exists quite often. Then we have the change curiosity, which is a more, I think, less common one. And then being focused. We need to have a process orientation. We need to utilize visualization, and we need to managing by learning. I think this is an absolutely key, and we need to have facts to drive and make us take decisions. So I would say these 7 would be kind of common denominators for companies who are more successful working with Hoshin Kanri and strategy compared to the ones that are less successful. So if we look at each of these a bit more deeply, so with the long-term thinking, it's to have that clearly defined and well understood true north, so we can navigate towards something, right? I mean, we say that business is a journey without an ending, hopefully. And if we are on a journey without an ending, we need to have something to kind of navigate towards. And that's important. That could, of course, be the vision statement we have. But part of that is also to break down the vision statement so it makes sense to people. So if this is our vision 2035, what is our 3 to 5 years steps we need to take, right? Because if it's only that vision 10 years ahead, it's probably very vague and broad, so you can argue that everything would fit into that, more or less, right? And we need to make sure that on that strategic journey to focus on how can we improve our competitiveness over time. So how do we build a more competitive company? So coming back to not only solving one individual problem, but building capabilities in the organization that, and not only leadership capabilities, but capabilities of how we manufacturing things or how we promote our services, etc. So we become more and more competitive. And for all companies that work with a lean philosophy to some extent, which I think today many companies do with continuous improvement and so on, the competitiveness is the driver of everything. How do we create more value with less resources? So that is kind of what we need to have in mind when we do long-term thinking. So this is where we think about value and so on. So and then we come to that change curiosity. And this is a bit more difficult one, I would say, but very, very important, because here we need to have all leaders and team members to challenge the current way of working. I mentioned before the status quo. So how do we break that? And to quote Albert Einstein, that I think many have done also before me, in that the definition of what you say, insanity is to do the same things over and over again and expect different results. So if we are not happy with the results, or if we see that we need to improve or take a step change, we need to think about how do we work today and change that rather than think about just reaching a target, no matter how we do that, right? So this would have everyone becoming a problem solver. So if I'm an executive, I'm a problem solver. Of course, I solve different problems than if I'm a first-line leader. But when we work with Hoshin, we want the management team to think about what are the big things that is preventing us from reaching our targets. And if you're a first-line leader, you would say, what are the things in my area that is preventing me from reaching my target? So everyone needs to be a problem solver. And a problem solver is not the person who is good in planning. A problem solver is someone that is good in understand what is the gap, why do I have the gap, and how can I close that gap by taking a few steps, right? And if we are going to be problem solver, we also need to accept that what is ahead of us is in the gray zone. And the gray zone is a concept that comes from Toyota Kata, where the gray zone is where facts and data ends. So when we are in the gray zone, we can only guess what will happen. We might have a good guess, but it's still a guess. So, and what we often do in strategy is to ask for detailed plans for the coming year and think that we will know everything in August. So what will happen next year? But we are really in the gray zone then. So what we often do is that we plan and we are furthest away from what we need to achieve. And instead of planning, we need to go into the gray zone with a more scientific mindset, saying, I can do an experiment. Because I don't know what will happen. I think this will happen, but let's see. And that's a completely different mindset than saying, I know what the plan should be. If we just do these 10 things, things will be okay, right? And quite often when we have done the first thing, we already then learn that, oh, it didn't happen exactly as we thought, because we are in the gray zone. And this is, I think, something we need to accept and of course learn how to deal with. But I think to start with, we need to accept that that's actually the case. And if we are in the gray zone, we need to have a different approach to how we achieve things. And that for me is the curiosity of change, to say, I don't really know what will happen. Let's figure that out. Let's do an experiment to do something and see what we can learn from that. And then, of course, it's about that focus. This is, I think, one of the main challenges, especially when I talk to executives, that I often hear we are not good in prioritizing. We have too many KPIs. Our KPIs is like what we say in Sweden, a smörgåsbord, a variety of choices that will appeal to everyone in the organization, because we don't want anyone feel left out, or we want to create the feeling that everyone can contribute, or whatever the reason might be. But we need to be focused. We need to align all our efforts towards a vital few objectives. And this is a difficult one, or challenging one, I would say. So being focused, doing the priorities, right? And when we do this, I remember when we implemented or deployed Hoshin in Toyota for the first time, we did it bottom up. So we had some targets from management team, and then we asked, so what are your plans to to do this, and everyone came in with the plans, and those plans kind of added up to the strategic plan. It was kind of bottom up, right? And from the management perspective, that was a true smorgasbord of activities, and it was not always easy to understand, are these the key activities we need to do, right? So what we want to do is to shift that around to some extent. So we need to, instead of just asking what are your plans, we need to have that conversation leader to leader, level to level, to say, this is where we need to go. What problems do you need to fix or solve to support the overall objectives? So it's not only to have the focus on the vital few, it's also to have the focus on where do we use our energy to solve the critical problems that support the overall objectives. So it's a prioritization, and it's that catchball process, or how we iterate level to level, that can help us to overcome this. And this is really important also, I would say. If we move on to the next one, we also see that if you are more process oriented, you are many times more successful working with strategy and Hoshin Kanri. And of course, you can say, yeah, we have an annual cycle of planning activities. So we have a process for it. Yes, of course, there is a process, but process orientation for me is more a mindset, realizing that our outcome is only the result of the way we work. So if you have an annual cycle and you feel that we don't really have a good strategy work, if we are process oriented, we would challenge that annual cycle to say, is this a good way to work? Because we have tried it, it doesn't seem to create the outcome we are looking for. So how can we change the way we work? So when I work with leaders, and when we work with leaders, we help them not with a fixed or predefined process. We help them to build the capabilities to always develop their own strategy process. Things might change, they will learn things. So in that sense, it's something that can always be updated, the way we work with our strategy. And I think that's quite important for a management team to always kind of see, can we improve the way we work? Were we happy with what the outcome last year or for the last 2-3 years? And if we are not, can we improve it somehow, right? So what we want to do is to build leadership capabilities that can take on any challenge instead of focusing solving a specific problem. So if we have those muscles, sometimes we talk about those kind of as muscles, right? We can take on any challenge. If we tend to be more focused on the problem that we see right now, and kind of just understand how we can solve that, we have not really prepared ourselves in a good way to deal with whatever will come next. So that's kind of the process orientation that is important to have when we work with Hoshin. So not only focusing the outcome, but also the way we reach the outcome. And then visualization. And of course, visualization means that you can use different tools. I mean, i-nexus has a really good solution for visualizing and kind of connecting bullet charts and X matrices and so on, right? So that's one things that we can look at visualization. Here I was thinking perhaps what are the steps we do to actually become good problem solvers and to be able to be that focused and that I mentioned before. So the first thing we need to do is to see. If we don't see the situation, then we don't really know. So visualization is to first to see everything. And based on that, we can understand why is the situation as it is. And when we understand, then we can go to action instead of just seeing and acting, right? But the key here is that we want to do this as a team. So it's not only I who should see, me who should understand and take action. How do we see as a team? Coming back to the clarity, coming back to consensus, right? And the way we can do that is to be good in visualization in different ways. Because if we see the same things, we can have a conversation so we understand the same things, and then we can take actions together as a team. So visualization is so important to, and not only have a board somewhere with some Excel sheets or so on. We need to embrace that in all our communication in many different ways. So visualization becomes something that is kind of vivid and ongoing all the time. So we see, we understand, we act always as a team. So, and then we talk about managing by learning. And learning, I think, is for me, is probably one of the keywords. There are a few, but we need to focus the learning. If we want to be problem solvers, and if we are in the gray zone, learning is essential. Not only doing the learnings, but also see what is my role as a leader, right? So if we focus on learning, that will ensure the long-term competitiveness. Short term, we might not reach all our targets as we wanted, but that could be okay if we have done a good learnings that will help us to recover and build an even stronger foundation, right? So a learning organization will be much more resilient and much more suitable to take on any new challenges in the future, right? And if we focus on the results, I think at best we will create short-term wins that might be difficult to repeat. So if we reach the target this year, if we did that by running really fast and just work as hard as we could, can we repeat that next year? Or if we reached the targets we wanted, but we couldn't really understand why we reached the targets, how can we make sure we keep that level? And how can we ensure that we keep and increase from that level, right? So as leaders, we should be much more focused and interested about learning than results. But results are also important, but that's how I should put it. And then finally, we have the facts that should drive and decide. So if we have data and facts, we can understand our needs, and with our needs, we can set challenging but achievable objectives and targets, right? And if we have the facts, we can understand the current situation, and with that, we can identify the real obstacles we need to remove. So what I'm saying here is that we need to have the courage, coming back to the 4 C's, to actually allow facts and data to drive a lot of the decisions, right? Instead of just going with gut feelings or my opinion against your opinion. So facts will help us to reach that consensus many times, that we agree on the same. Not saying always the facts will guide us where we kind of taking always the right decisions, but we can agree on, based on what we see, based on what we know, this is probably the best decision we can take right now. And then we need to learn. So that's quite important, that we have that mindset of facts to drive and decide. So those would be the kind of the in brief, the ingredients we have seen both from research and experience that companies who do Hoshin and strategy work better than the others are good on delivering on these 7 kind of factors, I would say.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Frederick. And I'm sure what I'm about to ask is on the tip of everyone else's tongue, which is how can I actually take practical steps to put in place the advice that you've just given to us?
So what can you do today, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are a few things you can absolutely do. One thing I have learned that could be very powerful, not thinking about having a full Hoshin system in place, right? But if you start to communicate your objectives or targets for the coming year or coming 6 months or whatever, right? Instead of just saying either you communicate the targets together with the plan or you ask just for the plan. Instead, ask the problems they need to solve. So if I'm your manager and I need to increase sales with 50 million euros, if you are the marketing or you are the regional sales manager somewhere, what is preventing you right now to contribute to that target? And I'm quite sure if you start to have that type of conversation, your leaders will tell you quite open and honest and quite immediate what they see as the main issues right now. Yeah, but we can't do this because of, right? Okay, good. That's probably a problem we need to solve, because you have already identified an obstacle that is preventing us from reaching a higher sales. So how do we fix that problem, right? So if you start to have that conversation instead of saying, we need to sell for 50 million more, what is your plan? Then you will come up with a lot of activities, but it's not sure that you will hit the real obstacles. So I think that's one thing you can do already today, right? To engage in that type of conversation with your people. And then, as I said before, instead of asking your colleagues or your team what they have accomplished, what results they have reached, ask them what they have learned. Because if they have reached the targets they were supposed to reach, what learnings did you make? Why did you reach the targets? If they have not reached the targets as they thought they would, instead of saying, oh, that was not good, ask, what have you learned? Why didn't you reach the target this time? Okay, good. Based on that learning, what would you do next then, trying to reach the target? So managing by learning or asking those questions will also quite quick, I think, create a different type of dialogue. That is kind of in the spirit and the way we want to do with Hoshin Kanri also. And if we look at more how we progress or track our progress, try to progress your end target. So let's say you use a traffic light system, green, yellow, red, right? Think about that traffic light system, not so much about evaluating your plan, but actually evaluate, will we reach end target, yes or no? Because the plan is just an experiment. And if we see that we are following our plan, but we don't think we will reach our end target, the plan is probably not right. So change the plan. If we have defined the end target in a good way, saying this is a need, it doesn't matter if we learn that it was difficult to reach it, it's still a need. So think about how can we do our best to reach that. So when we track progress, keep end target in mind and not the plan. That can also create a quite different approach to this, and that will also create more sense of urgency, right? And we will not have that situation where people might feel as a failure or feeling I'm not doing a good job. If we believe in learning, it's more about do something, learn from it, and then see how far that will take you. And then we continue. So these are 3 things that I think as a leader you can do without creating a new documentation or implementing new system. This is much more how you can go back and have a different communication or dialogue with your team. And if you start to have this type of dialogue, you have also take your first steps towards working with Hoshin Kanri, I would say, in a bit unstructured way. So ask what problems they can be to solve, what have they learned, and track your progress towards end target and not your plan. Those could be tips that you can try already today or tomorrow, I would say.
Great, thank you, Fredrik. Thank you for the entirety of today's webinar, and on behalf of myself and our audience, it's been eye-opening. I would like to just direct everyone's attention about how they can keep the momentum tomorrow and beyond. Obviously, Fredrik has given us a lot of food for thought here today, but what I would love to do is invite you all for attending a workshop hosted by Fredrik in the future, where you're able to put into practice today's learnings and go through an end-to-end exercise on building your own Hoshin plan. And what you'll get out of that, quite simply, is the plan itself, but also you'll strengthen your leadership skills in strategy, which is something that is always a continuous learning cycle that we go through. And underneath all of that, you're going to be able to network with your peers. If that's something that you would like to learn more about, you can do so by heading over to the URL below here, info.i-nexus.com/Hoshin-workshop, where you can register and find out more about Fredrik, the workshop, and what you'll get out of it. And beyond the workshop itself, I would encourage everyone to visit www.btp.dk today to learn more about BTP and possibly have a conversation with Fredrik off the back of this session. So for now, that is it, everyone. Thank you for watching this webinar on demand. Fredrik, thank you for being an amazing host and presentation that you delivered to us today. And for everyone else, we hope to see you in the workshop in the near future. Thank you, Fredrik.
Thank you. Bye.